One of the things you keep hearing from people who are against immigration will say, well, other countries enforce their borders. Why is the United States any different?
Other countries
Kelly, maybe.
enforce their borders. Why is the United States any different?
Not every country enforces their borders the same way. Not every country has to enforce their borders this way. And I'm no expert in other countries, but I can see the use of private detention centers, the restrictive nature of, or how should I say, the penalization of lack of status is somewhat unique. It's a criminalization. Okay, you didn't do this correctly from an immigration standpoint. We're going to make you a criminal. That is fairly unique in America.
The other piece of it is that we are, despite what's on the USCIS website, a nation of immigrants. So as a settler colonial nation like Australia and New Zealand and Canada, the only people who can claim to be here originally are indigenous people, right? So we have there's a specific reason that we've always been a nation of immigrants. And the other piece of it that I didn't touch on in my talk is the reason that a lot of people want to come here isn't that they want to be Americans so badly. It's that, for example, many of the Mexican folks who are here in Milwaukee are here because NAFTA destabilized their hometowns to the extent where they had to leave. Many of the Central Americans who are walking out of their homes in Tegucigalpa and San Salvador had to leave because of the U.S. dirty wars and the kind of gangsterism and violence created in their home societies. So it's just the other side of our role as an empire that we displace people all over the globe. I could talk about Iraq or Syria or Afghanistan or many other countries where the U.S. has been engaged and created displaced people, and then we're like, oh, well, they can't come in here.
Well, not to mention too, our drug war has destabilized a lot of countries south of our border. The other thing too that you hear is, oh, Obama was the deporter in chief. So what's different? What Trump is doing than what Barack Obama did? Kelly.
That is something I spoke about a lot in early 2017. And frankly, President Obama, in his early days, did deport a lot of people. His numbers were high. The big difference, though, is by his second term, there was a very clear structure in who was put up for deportation, who was removed, with a real emphasis on criminal aliens. And so I, when I look at it, that is the biggest difference. I used to get the phone call, okay, you don't have status, what are your risks, what should you do? And my attitude most of the time was just lay low. You are a great member of your community, you're not in trouble, you have no background. The chances of you getting caught up in anything is very, very small. That is gone. I don't tell that to people anymore at all. And I think that is the biggest shift.
You were talking about the different countries having different, or you had these different examples for people having different wait times. Is there some kind of system to that? I noticed you said that, it seems like we're much more willing to take Canadians than Filipinos or whatever. What is with that?
The law is set up that you can never give a certain percentage of green cards to a specific country. And I think it's capped out at 6.5%, 7%. So we can never, in any year, give Indian applicants more than 7% of our green cards. Even though if you look at the populations of those countries, they're incredibly large. So what happens is, if you happen to be from India, even though really, you're doing the same job at the same company for the same amount of pay, the fact that you were born in India means that, unfortunately, your wait time is just going to be much, much, much larger. There are also certain visa categories where a country can get preferential treatment. Canada and Mexico do have a few visas under the NAFTA treaty. There's a special visa for Australian citizens and Chile and Singapore. Really unique kind of special carve out for those countries.
How many people from Milwaukee have been deported since T has been under, since we've been under T's regime?
How many people from Milwaukee have been deported since Trump became president?
There is a way. Organizations are trying to do a better job of tracking enforcement and removal. I know I'm a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and they have a map that they update on enforcement activities. So whenever there's big arrests, big raids, big pickups. And just a few days ago, I stumbled across another organization that is trying to track more removals per state, but I don't know that number. I can tell you my sense is that ICE in Milwaukee is not as bad as ICE in some countries, but it's worse than in other places.
One of the things that we do, and actually my role when I started with Voses was that I was doing deportation defense work, and actually in that capacity I met Rachel. But at that time, let's see, we're talking about 2007, I was seeing, actually, on one of my first days at Voses, there was a line out the door of people, and then I'm like, oh, what's going on here? I'm setting up my email, my first week, and the lady that was the office administrator at the time, she said, oh, thank goodness you're here. There was a raid. All these people are here because somebody in their household got picked up. So this was in the summer of, not 2007, 2011. The summer of 2011. And then we had seen that in Milwaukee every summer around the same sort of weeks, there was like a special investigation raid. And it was like clockwork. Every year I had seen it. So, I mean, right now, we still do deportation defense for anybody from the community that, like, hey, someone got picked up, they come to Voses. It is, I don't know that it seems drastically higher than before, than under the previous administration, but it's been steady. I haven't seen a decrease, that's for sure.
So this is a really important point for historians. We have a project going on that I'm co-investigator called Documenting Deportation, because right now, I'm happy to hear about the American immigration lawyers, like the only people keeping the numbers are ICE, right? And we know from this administration that it's very difficult to get actual data that's reliable. So people are being scooped up. And what we're trying to do with Documenting Deportation is just have an alternative database, because we won't know in 1 or 2 or 50 years how many. And, it's important that we know.
I come from an agricultural background, and when people complain about the immigrants taking jobs away from Americans, that is an oxymoron, because I don't know of anybody that wants to go out to the lettuce fields of California or to the milking parlors in the Midwest to help the farmers on the farms to get the products to market. And this is a very concerning thing to me, because I like to eat and I like food, but a good conversation around the cocktails or the dinner table would be to say, well, look what we're having for dinner tonight. Do you know how that got to our table? And they have now developed milking parlors where the cows can position themselves in the stanchion, and through artificial intelligence, the little milkers can attach to the udders and milk the cows through artificial intelligence and digital techniques that eliminate the use of actual humans to hook up the cows to the milking parlor. But that isn't feasible for all dairy farmers, because that costs a great deal to install a self-milking parlor for the cows. That costs lots of moolah.
Hello there. Interesting to listen to everyone's stories and comments. I feel for you at the end. Your bravery to get here. It was a story to hear, straight out of the movie, but the fact that it was real, it's interesting. So I want to give you a backdrop to this because there's a little bit of story to it, and the question goes to Kelly because of her legal background. So as you can tell from my accent, I'm British background. My parents are Indian. So I met my wife in 2000, and we had a relationship up until 2010 when we decided to get married. And then I went through the legal green card process. And anyone who thinks that's just a free thing that you go through, or even though it takes a long time, like Kelly said, it's not. I paid probably close to $8,000 at the end of this process. And it's not just the $8,000, it's that my wife had to pay money from the US to sponsor me to come over here to get married, to start the process for the green card as well. So they're taking money from a legal US citizen as well, because they don't want me coming from England, we're meant to be partners in the same sort of setup, to take any money off America. So if anyone thinks that the government's not earning a lot of money out of this process, they are. They're coining it in. So this leads to the story. So basically, the green card process was long-winded. I was scammed in the middle of it by a government physician, appointed a physician, who I was told when I got the papers in process that I was sent back, that my medical system wasn't qualified, that I had to have a government-appointed physician to sign the documents here. So I phoned for an hour to get the right physician in Leighton Avenue to go to with my wife to get these papers signed, just to qualify. And that's a stupid thing because I can't get into the country unless I've passed a physical in the US Embassy in Britain to get a K2 visa. And I paid, to start off with there, nearly $500, $600 to get that process into action. So, you know, the money's ticking up here. So the physician basically decides not to sign my documents, even though they're all above board and I passed the medicals, because he didn't want to be liable to put his signature on the dotted line. And he ended up signing across the margin where the text stops. And then he charged me $50 to put his medical stamp on the documentation. So that was, and then to send the green card process back. And then I waited up to 8 months, and I'm sitting here like a lemon, can't get any employment, nothing. My wife's sponsoring me, and luckily I'm a professional, so I had money saved from the UK to survive. But I don't know how other people, immigrants, would survive going through that process with no money and employing lawyers. I did it myself with my wife because I'm reasonably good at doing paperwork. So I get the green card, hooray. And not only that, you get the green card only for 2 years. And then you have to reapply for a 10-year extension, which costs you another $1,000+ to get the extension. And then you have to reapply the documentation for that. So I got that. So I'm a legal green card holder. I haven't got a full citizenship. So I'm getting employed and stuff like that. And then last November, I mean, they've known me coming into the country for professional reasons, employment, etc., seeing my wife continually. I've spent more money coming to this country, traveling, than I have anywhere else in the world, and I'm globally aware. I get to last November, and I'm coming back after a trip to see my family in England, and I get off the plane in the tunnel, and there's 2 TSA officials at the end of the tunnel, and they don't even blink and look at me, and they say, "Follow me." And I'm escorted by 2 officials down past everybody who's lining up to get into the country. And they're basically telling me that they're going to interview me. And not only are they going to interview me, they're I'm going to have a second interview by the FBI after that. They walk me there. First interview lasts for 40 minutes. Then they get me to step to one side and wait with 9 or 10 other brown skin-colored people, no white Caucasian, sitting there as well in the same process as me. They take my laptop, my cell phone into a private room to interrogate it. No direction of what they're going to do with it. They come out, tell me to give them my personal entry details to that cell phone so they can get into it. I can't call my wife or no one. There's no, they don't give me any representation of the process, what's going to happen, nothing. After that, I get walked to another room. 2 FBI officials then give me obscure questions after the first interviews, And then finally they let me go after they take all my luggage out, and that's close to 2 hours. Now, what I wanted to ask Kelly was, how legal is that process?
100% legal.
100% legal.
And when Rachel talks about, what they're doing with immigration is going to trickle down to U.S. citizens, she's absolutely right. The ability of CBP, which is the people at the airport that screen you, the people at the border that screen you, the ability of CBP to ask you for your Facebook account, your email account information, open up that laptop, and look at everything inside it is legal. It's happening, and I expect it to start happening to U.S. citizens very soon. So if it doesn't scare you that this is happening to immigrants, at least it should scare you it could happen to you pretty soon, because the protocol is already in place.
Hi, my name is Reina, and I'm actually an attorney at the State Public Defender's Office. And those who work in immigration know that immigration is self-funded, right? So all the immigration court and everything else comes from those fees that they take. But I think a lot of people are not aware of that, right? So they think my tax dollars are going to keep this process going. And Sessions has made so many changes. So I've had some clients that in the past, an immigration judge would have put their case on hold and allowed for the process to go through. Now they're just being deported, right? How do we educate people? How do we let them know? Because people know what's going on Twitter, but they don't know the actual changes that are taking place. How do we make sure that people are being educated and being made aware of all those changes that are affecting so many people?
How do we know that, how do we educate people about the changes that have occurred? Michelle.
So one of the things that we do as an advocacy organization is the sharing of the stories, sharing of the testimonies. I think that when you make, like if Miguel had the choice to come here on a plane versus take the journey that he took, what choice do you think if he had that choice? So let's start there. People don't have that choice. So I think that the testimonies are important. And I think that making the issue human. So when you do hear about somebody that's coming at you with all this anti-immigrant rhetoric, have you ever sat down and talked to an immigrant and asked them about their journey? Like, that's the question that I would ask them. I don't get that sometimes because I look brown, so of course they're like, oh, well, she's probably an immigrant too. So I think that if you do get that, that's a question that I would ask, have you sat down and had somebody tell you their story? If people had these choices, of course they would not choose the road less traveled. They would choose the easier choice, but they just don't have it, right? So I would start there. I think humanizing the issue is really important.
Any other answer to that?
I never think it hurts to send those letters to the editor. I mean, be vocal about it. Talk about immigration, because the anti-immigrant rhetoric is big, and make those calls. Your Congress people cannot hear enough from you about immigration, because for every pro-immigrant call they get, they're going to get 5 anti-immigrant calls from FAIR. I mean, that's just how that organization is set up. They're very organized. They're very organized. So send those letters to the editor, call your Congress people, and do it a lot.
Just, I want to ask Kelly, I know you said that was legal, your answer to my thing.
I'll talk to you afterwards.
Yeah, no, but what I'm saying is I talked to someone at the ACLU, a legal representative there, and they said that process that I was put through was totally illegal because there was no representation, no legal qualification of what the process was or anything. Even, when the first ban happened at the airport and lawyers went racing to try and help the people, they were barred from the airport because they couldn't get in to represent anyone.
I can talk to you about this afterwards, but there are CBP memos on the use and access of Facebook accounts, email accounts, and they have a ton of discretion with it.
What is FAIR?
Federation for American Immigration Reform.
Federation for American Immigration Reform, interesting story. Organization begun by a not American, British eugenicist, funded from the very far racist right. They have a certain amount of, they've they've kind of cleaned up their act and tried to look more legitimate since the 1970s, but their origins are in the eugenicist, extreme racialist, separate species believing far right. So, but they have a lot of money. They're very well funded, and they seem a lot more savory than they are.
Where does that money come from?
Pioneer Fund. It comes from deep-pocketed right-wing money in this country and in Europe, and I could point you to sources about exactly which. But it's not unlike. I don't know that the Kochs fund FAIR, but it's that kind of apparatus where you have a deep-pocketed right-wing long push against immigration going on.
Why? What's the basic purpose for anti-immigration sentiment?
Well,
Especially in a right-wing rich people.
there's the far. I mean, Nancy's saying there's the far right racialist. Let's just say the word Nazi oriented. Those people really believe in a hierarchical idea of the species, right? But then there's the fact, and I think our current administrator is not stupid to deploy. Nativism has a lot of currency in American history. So you tell people there are criminals to come mess with your communities. They're going to take your jobs. They won't even speak English at the gas station. Good God, right? They're gonna change our culture. This is the oldest thing. This is very old, but it's fear politics. So you have the far racist right, and then you have people whose living standard has declined in the past 20 years because of federal economic and labor policies. One of the things that happens in my classrooms fairly frequently is I'll have a white student who says, things are not so great in Wisconsin for my family. 2 generations ago, working class people could get well-paying jobs. Now those jobs have gone. They've gone overseas, and it's really hard for my family. And my work is to say, yes, absolutely, and that is the same thing. The forces that have shipped those jobs overseas is the same reason that migrants are winding up in Milwaukee because their farms failed in Mexico. But it can look, and race is really useful here, like those people arrive when things are getting worse than for us. It must be causal. It's bad historical thinking, right? Just because we get more migration at a time of economic downturn doesn't mean the migrants caused it. But the 50-cent explanation, it's good politics. It's not true. It's wrong. It's motivated by terrifyingly racist, demonic people. But it works politically. We saw that in 2017, right? In 2016, the election. That's why they won.
My question is, there's a lot of industries in our country that would suffer drastically if we were able to deport all of our undocumented workers, like the construction industry, hospitality industry, and certainly the agricultural industry. And what can we do to put pressure on the owners of these businesses that seem to turn a blind eye to the conditions that their workers are dealing with?
That's actually a tactic that we've used in our organizing campaigns. So, for example, in 2016, I believe it was February, I don't know if any of y'all remember, that we pretty much took over the Capitol. There was some bills that would have the effects of the 287G program that's happening at the county level in Waukesha, but statewide. It would ban sanctuary cities, number one. So it was this anti-sanctuary city bill outlawing any sanctuary city in the state of Wisconsin. Additionally, it would have helped, I think it was state employees be able to ask people about their immigration status. So you can look it up, AB 450, Wisconsin. So that bill, we were able to defeat it. But in 2016, one of the things that we did was that we formed a small, it wasn't a formal coalition, but it was a group of different dairy farmers where we said, we know what political side of the aisle most of you are on. We get that. But here's the thing, if this bill goes into law, it will affect your bottom line Absolutely. So what the they actually had approached us because most of their workers were not going to show up on this statewide day of strike that we were having and getting people to come to the Capitol. So they reached out to us and they said, why is my whole first and second shift not coming? What's going on? A lot of them were angry, and then a lot of them were saying, how can I help? So basically what we did there was we had to come to an agreement. They said, if all of my workers walk out, my cows will die. Like, they will literally die. So then we came to an agreement where, okay, we'll keep a skeletal, we'll talk to the workers. And then the boss said, they're not even listening to me. They're going to listen to you, Voses, so like, help me get this. So then we were able to get a skeletal crew of workers to stay to keep the cows alive. The rest of the workers went out on strike. In exchange, the dairy owners wrote letters and called all of the politicians in their area, most of which were Republican. So that's one of the strategies that we implemented because it affects their bottom line. And you're not going to talk humanity, well then let's talk money.